Thank you very much. What a splendid introduction that we talk about spam bots and them hijacking the Twitter feed. Because spam is what I'm going to start out with. I don't know who of you remembers that. Happened about 2 months ago. It was huge in the British press. And we didn't really see that coming. Huge in the British press was of an Amazon clothes seller who algorithmically produced T-shirts and came up with this genius combination: keep calm and rape a lot. Now, these T-shirts didn't ever actually exist. These are just renders of an algorithm gone haywire. However, the outrage in the UK especially was tangible, because quite frankly, our intuitions aren't yet tuned to spam not being just in the digital domain, to spam not just being in our inboxes and our Twitter feeds, but rather in Amazon stores on T-shirts that potentially could be bought. Going further from that, our intuitions aren't just not tuned to products being potentially spammable, but spam appearing in our daily lives. This is the Kodak picture frame. I think it was first introduced about 3 years ago, and they had a very clever idea. Let's just give that picture frame, which you put into your home, on your wall, an email address. So you can send pictures to that email address, and they just pop up magically on your kitchen wall. What they didn't consider was the problem of spam. So a lot of people started complaining about, let's just say, inappropriate pictures appearing in their kitchens. The company who put out the Keep Calm T-shirts in the UK went out with, "We apologize for any offense our algorithms may have caused." I'm quoting Tim Maley, Quiet Babylon again. This is right up there with the motive of the algorithm is still unclear. Last year, there was an algorithmic trading robot, a single mysterious computer program that made up 4% of all traffic in that week. That is huge amounts of bandwidth, that is huge amounts of trading activity. The motive of the algorithm is still unclear. It looks like that, but we've come to a stage where we ascribe motives to algorithms. How do we get here? We were just talking about the excitement of the early internet days. Let's take a step even further back. It was in 1992 that this very talented physicist at CERN was bored and was frustrated to not get access to the research data he needed access to. So he developed a system that we now call the World Wide Web. If you look back, the World Wide Web was really just about being a better document access system. It was about efficiently posting and getting information out of an information store. A better electronic library, if you will. 3 years later, there was the hype cycle about the World Wide Web, the internet, in full swing. The truth is, no online database will replace your daily newspaper. No CD-ROM can take the place of a competent teacher, and no computer network ever, one might add, will change the way government works. We have the benefit of hindsight, and hindsight is always 20/20. But of course, everything of that has come to fruition. It's only been 2 weeks ago that gov.uk, the new website of the United Kingdom government, won a major design prize. It's rapidly changing the way government works. MOOCs are all the rage, massive open online courses, and I'm fairly sure there's a lot of that happening in the startup stages here. Daily newspapers, do we even need to talk about that? Now look where we are. I see a lot of computers, I see a lot of iPads, I see a lot of smartphones. We didn't imagine it to be that 20 years ago. 2, we still don't see it coming. I'm quoting last year. Next conference, this very conference. The conference is dedicated to post-digital era. Why? Because the digital revolution is over. Digital has won. It is no longer new and innovative as today we take its use for granted. What do we take for granted? It really boils down to that. It's accessories to your smartphone. It's, $6 keychains for your $500 iPhone, which track your $5 keys. Or this is all the rage right now. Remote-controlled RGB diodes. Whoa, lighting. This is the Philips Hue, you can get it from the Apple Store, it's exclusive there. It's a really nice product, don't get me wrong, I like their API, I played around with it a bit. It works really well. It has a nice iPhone app, and if you look at how it's marketed, you can set scenes to the rooms and all like that. They have one big problem. I'd ask you to guess, but really, if you flick your light switch, the system doesn't work anymore. You shut the electricity off, you get with your routine, what you used to, what's easy, what's natural, what we learned over 100 years, and that newfangled technological innovation doesn't work anymore. Something's broken there. Now, my background is in energy. In energy, you learn a lot about economics, and this guy, Jevon, a UK economist in the early 19th century, is a really interesting one. 19th century Britain was really about coal and steel, and how can we make the use of coal more efficient. So he came up with a paradox, which is technological progress that increases the efficiency with which a resource is utilized tends to increase rather than decrease the rate of consumption of that resource. I could now go on with economic theories about that, with the marginal utility of, with the marginal price of a resource dropping, which tends to increase consumption, but really what it boils down to is the cheaper it becomes to use just one more of really just anything, we will use more of it. I quite like that picture. That's the United States, it's a loo. They have an LCD display which is powered 24/7, which has a motion sensor, so if you step in front of it, it will blast sound at you. And we just do it because we can, because it's cheap enough, and apparently the advertising revenue outstrips the cost of running that thing. I think it's hardly any question that the cost of one more unit of computing is dropping precipitously. This is the Cray 2. It's a 1985 commercially available supercomputer, top of the line back then. It did about 1.5 billion floating point operations per second. That was the stuff that was used to compute rockets. That was the stuff used to compute flight paths of intercontinental ballistic missiles. 1.5 billion floating point operations. Not even 30 years ago. Now look at you, how many iPads do I see? Because you all have that power at your hands today. And it's all because of this guy. He made it accessible to you. He saw Moore's law, he saw that the price is going to drop. What he decided to do is that we should start to creatively waste transistors. That's how it's described, creatively waste computing resources. Because what he really did was, that was the age of the terminal. That was, you know the movie Hackers. You know the blinking green lines of text on black terminal backgrounds. That was what computing was like in that days. Because computing was seen as a scarce resource. It was seen as something that is expensive. It was seen as something that you need to conserve. Alan Kay saw Moore's law, and he decided that he's just going to waste computing by, drawing funny images, tiny icons, cartoons, if you will, to make it accessible. And it's only because of that. is only because of that creative waste of resources that were priorly seen as scarce, then we end up with Macs. I mean, Alan Kay worked for Xerox PARC, and I guess you're here at a digital conference, so I think you all know the founding myths of Xerox PARC and the Apple graphical user interface. If it wasn't for Alan Kay, we all wouldn't be here with our shiny toys. So why am I here talking to you about the weird is yet to come? I'm an IoT consultant. I work on the Internet of Things. I study the market. I consult with clients. I forecast what is about to happen. And you saw Alex yesterday, and she was here talking about that's her throwing her toys out of the pram. I'm getting frustrated as well, because we see so much potential, and everybody's talking about it, but this potential is ultimately not realized because companies worry about the connectivity. They worry about getting stuff online. They worry about connecting the things, but they don't worry about the things. So stop worrying about connectivity and work on what it will mean. Shirky is an international renowned scholar. I think he works at NYU. He has a very interesting book out, I don't know, 5 years ago now, called Here Comes Everybody. And I love that dictum. When I first heard it, it was a smack in my face, because this is true. This is so obviously true. Communications tools don't get socially interesting until they get technologically boring. It must have been a sad state to be the first person with a fax machine. Nobody to fax to. But, it's not just about communications tools. It's anything, really. If you want to see what effects technology will have, stop worrying about the technology, because that's not really where the game is at. The game is at getting the technology into people's hands and seeing how they play with it, how they use it, and what social effects it will have. So I was just saying about, stop worrying about connectivity. If you're in the connectivity space, your game is up. Seriously. Consider connectivity solved. This is the Almond Plus. It's a Kickstarter project. It's just, when you're doing slides, you find that it's really hard to illustrate stuff like corporate acquisitions and mergers, because how do you find the graphics? Anyway, this is the Almond Plus. It's the router that has everything. It has Zigbee, it has 6LoWPAN, it has all the protocols you might ever need to connect stuff in your home to the network. This is here to illustrate one single point. Cisco, early this year, went and got out of the private market. They sold their whole game, their whole networking gear, which they used to sell, which you used to get with your telecommunications provider. Sold that to Belkin. Belkin is one of the major players in the market, and my assumption is, see 1.5 years from now, you'll just have the connectivity. Take it for granted. If you work on a hardware project right now that works on connectivity, you won't be at market before they came out with that, so don't bother. Also, if you worry about the connectivity, your focus is on the connectivity, which makes really everything about just, how do we connect that? And then, once you figure out the connectivity, you go, yeah, we really should do an iPhone app for that. What customers don't want an iPhone app? I don't want a smartphone to control my lighting. What I really want to do is when I sit down at home to decompress and, do a bit of Halo 3 on my Xbox, I want the explosions not to be the ambilight on my telly. I want that whole room to explode in light. Because that's what I call immersive gaming. Unfortunately, no company has done that yet, because you're all worried about how can I get the connectivity in there, and not how will customers actually use that. So what you should do is really just work on interesting stuff, take the connectivity for granted and think about what you'd want to see people do with that. This is an example of his prototype, unfortunately. If it was commercially available, I sure as hell would have one. It's called the Oogle. It's done by a design studio in Oslo called Boy, and it's really beautiful and it's really simple. It's that wooden owl, which just sits there. It's nice, it's decorative, and you've seen Goodnight Lamp yesterday, and Alex talked about minimum viable presence. I call this minimum viable communication. It's just, the owl has changed. It has changed its state. It doesn't matter when it was received. I just look at it and, oh, it's black. So whatever meaning we encoded in that, it's presented. And it's presented as state. It's not intrusive. It's just there. That's for the whimsy. That's for the beautiful. That's for potentially interesting products of the future. Now, if you've been here before, there was Hermione Way talking about the Google Glass. This is one of the other Google Moonshot projects. I quite like it because, I like driving once in a while, but really most of the time I just want to get from A to B. So the whole idea of driving, also I'm a cyclist, I must add, and the whole idea of car drivers not sitting behind the wheels, but computers taking care of that, is a huge relief for me as a cyclist. However, what we're doing with Google, with the driverless car, is really just, we take that cool technology and it's really hard tech to make that happen, but we don't look at the social impacts. We don't look how it's going to be used by people and how we want it to be used by people. So thank God for ethnographers and design researchers. I strongly encourage you to read up on a guy called Jan Chipchase. He's doing work for Arup now, I think. No, Frog. He looked at self-driving cars and the social interactions and the patterns in the designs that might occur. And he came up with a couple of patterns I found potentially interesting. One is the car surprise. That's very sweet. So basically, the idea is that you find your car doing something which you didn't expect it to be there, like picking up flowers at the mall. But, this is the world, and I trained with a lot of economists to know that this world is always a happy place, but there's sinister forces out there. So I find this vision far more interesting, trailer trashing, where the dodgy-looking vehicle is assigned to trail an otherwise apparent owner. What can you do? There's a car following you. There's no driver in there. You don't know who it belongs to. It looks like shit, and it's out there to, do basically character assassination, because there's this shitty car following you, and it looks like it's yours. And that's the thing. We always talk about the technology. We never talk about how it's going to be used, how we want it to be used, and what the effects are going to be. Because really, what glass is going to be used for is to find my $5 key. Thank you very much.
So Martin, you work as a consultant. What industry, most of them?
Very, very wide. I mean, half of the clients I can't tell you, but it ranges from insurance car manufacturers to retail. So it's everyone, basically. Just like the internet touches everyone, IoT touches everybody.
And what are their questions for you as a consultant?
Depends on where I am, really. I mean, in Germany, and there's a couple of advertising agency guys here. You mostly have to start explaining what IoT is, what mostly means explaining what the internet is. But really, currently it's mostly just getting them to accept the notion that stuff or things are going to be connected, that this dissolves notions of ownership, that there's interesting stuff you can do with it, and that their old models of just selling products clearly aren't going to be viable anymore.
And where do you see the biggest challenges for you as a consultant then in this kind of work?
Surviving long enough until it's really taking off, to be honest.
Okay.
Because it's always like that. I mean, you could have been Friendster and been on the trend for like ages, and then when the time is right, there was Facebook, and they took the market. So really, it's about teaching enough people to kind of know about this, to accept this as reality, and then trying to find interesting ways of making that happen.
You taught your talk, "The Weird is Yet to Come." So what kind of weird implications could you imagine?
Well, I find, cars trailing you in the street already kind of weird, and I find spam. I mean, I started out with product spam. What happens when the Minority Report vision comes to fruition? But we see on digital ads right now that the cost of an individual ad is close to zero. Mm-hmm. So what is hindering people, botnets, whatever, from spamming our cities?
Okay.
We have trash cans with displays. Mm-hmm. What is keeping us from hijacking that?
Mm-hmm.
The future only gets really interesting if you think about the secondary effects of technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Martin Spindler.
Thanks for having me.